We're here in Copenhagen for COP15, the UN's International Summit on Climate Change. 192 countries, with nearly 20,000 delegates, observers and press, have all converged on the Danish capital to discuss climate change and averting a global warming disaster. But in light of the recent ClimateGate scandal, where the IPCC's chief scientists at East Anglia University were caught massaging the data for world temperature records, the question now for Copenhagen is, does carbon dioxide really matter? Away from the UN summit site at Bella Center, we spent a day near the city's Christiania district at a meeting organized by Climate Sense, an off-summit international conference where the tough questions are being posed about the veracity of the IPCC's so-called scientific consensus. We spoke to Lord Christopher Monckton from the UK, a former advisor to Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher and chief advisor to the Science and Public Policy Institute.
So what we're looking at here is a governing class which is saying, don't do as we do as we say. And they're saying, we want to take absolute power by what will be, if they succeed in getting the treaty that's now in draft, a bureaucratic coup d'etat. Most national newspapers, most major electronic news media have not ever reported what is actually in the draft treaty. The proposal for a world government, the proposal for savage taxation of Western countries in alleged reparation for imagined and, of course, imaginary climate debt, so-called, the powers to cancel all patent and intellectual property rights, the powers to impose a 2% tax on every financial transaction, and that alone would represent close to 50% of the gross domestic product of the wealthy nations, going to this new, huge government with, as far as I can make it out from the treaty, somewhere between 600 and 700 new, separate, expensive bureaucracies that you and I are going to have to pay for. I find this extraordinary, and I see in green letters daubed all over Copenhagen the word Hopenhagen. Having read the treaty and having met some of the people who are trying to negotiate it, Copenhagen would be better.
Ian Plimer is a professor of mining geology at the University of Adelaide and emeritus professor of earth sciences at the University of Melbourne in Australia. He has recently published a definitive book on the Earth's climate, Heaven and Earth.
Well, science is married to evidence, and that evidence we get from observation, from measurement, and from experiment. And we argue about how we get that evidence and what it all means, and then we create a theory. What we've recently seen is scientific evidence has been lost, so they tell us. We've seen scientific evidence that's been changed or slightly massaged to make the results look much more scary. What we've seen is scientific fraud. That fraud was committed by the same people who are driving the IPCC, and these are the same people who are driving this Copenhagen conference. And I think major policies that will hurt the average person based on scientific fraud really have to be stopped.
With the science behind global warming now under the gun, endgame policies like cap and trade may soon be dissected in similar fashion, bringing the whole conversation of climate change alarmism out of its current theater and into a new phase of rigorous public debate.